Now let's go ahead and talk about some advanced techniques when working with masks. We'll go ahead and start out with previewing masks. When working on a mask, it can oftentimes be helpful to view the mask in different ways or even temporarily disable it. You've already seen me do most of these in some previous lessons, but here I'll walk you through the actual shortcuts that I'm using. The first one, and one of my favorites, is to preview the mask in black and white. And to do this, you simply press and hold the Option or Alt key and then click that mask, and then you get to view it in that black and white mode. If you'd like to preview the mask area, basically the area that's not being affected by the mask, then you want to select the mask and then use the # key. And after you do that, you'll see a nice red overlay over those areas. If you'd like to disable your mask so you can actually see what it looked like before you started masking, hold the Shift key and then click the mask, and it will toggle that mask visibility. Let's jump into Photoshop to see this firsthand. Here I have a photo of a skateboarder with a textured backdrop. Let's go ahead and walk through the keyboard shortcuts you can use to preview your mask. First of all, if you press and hold the Option or Alt key and then click on that mask, you'll see the same mask in black and white, but as a big preview inside of your image. This is a great view mode to use when you're refining your mask, especially when working with things like channels. If you want to get out of this mode, you can just click away on anything, or you can just toggle it again by using that Option or Alt key. Next, you can preview the mask area by pressing that # key. By default, this gives you a red overlay. Now, if red is not a good color for you to preview, or if you have a photo where you have a lot of red in it, and it's just not going to give you a good idea of what you're looking at, you can actually change that preview color. So if you want to do that, right-click over the mask, and then go down to Mask Options. Next, choose the color you want to work with. I'll go ahead and choose a nice blue color, and click OK. You can also change the opacity setting. 50% is the default, and that's usually a pretty good number, but if you have a good reason to change that so you can preview it differently, go ahead and change it to more or less. Then when you click OK, that new preview color will appear. And that option should stay set for you, but you can always go back and change it to another color if you want to go back to red or anything else. To get out of this view, just press that # key once again. And lastly, if you want to temporarily disable your mask, press and hold the Shift key and then click the mask, and a big X will appear over that mask telling you that it is not visible right at this moment. If you want to get out of that view, just do the same thing. Press and hold the Shift key and click the mask. Another good technique to learn is how to duplicate a mask. This is really helpful when you want to reuse a mask because it prevents you from having to create that same mask over and over again. Duplicating a mask is quite simple. You press and hold the Option or Alt key, and then you drag the mask to where you want it to go. So for this example, I have a curves layer at the bottom, and I'd like to reuse the same mask for another layer at the top. So I press and hold the Option or Alt key and click and drag it, and you'll also see your cursor change to kind of this double cursor. And then when you release, you'll usually get a pop-up that asks you if you want to replace it. So you'll choose yes. You can also check the box if you just don't want to see that again. And then once you release, you'll have that new mask duplicated on whichever layer you dragged it to. Let's jump into Photoshop and I'll show you how this works firsthand. For this image, I've already done some luminosity masking. I'll show you a before and after preview just by pressing and hold the Option or Alt key, and then I click that eyeball at the bottom so you can see the before and after. What I'd like to do is add some more contrast to kind of that center area with the mountains and the grass, but I don't really want it to affect the water or the sky. The layer that I've used to edit the shadows already has a pretty good mask that will work. If I press and hold the Option or Alt key and click the mask, you can see that the mountains are masked in white, and so that means that whatever is added to that layer is affecting the mountains. So I'd like to create a layer and use that exact same mask. I'll go ahead and start out by clicking that top layer, and I'm going to add a black and white adjustment layer. I'm not actually going to convert it to black and white, but instead I'm going to change the blending mode of this layer down to soft light. And if I toggle it off and on, you can see it's adding some nice contrast, but it's applying it to everything. So I'm going to take that mask from the shadows and duplicate it so it's in the black and white layer. So we'll go ahead and start out by pressing and holding the Option or Alt key. I'm going to click and drag that mask from the shadows and then release it over the black and white layer. Now, I didn't have that pop-up come up because I've probably already cleared it in the past. But if you do this on your own and you see a pop-up appear, go ahead and click yes, and then you'll get exactly what I got right there. So now if I toggle that top layer off and on, you can see it's only affecting the areas that are masked. Now, I could go in and edit this mask if I wanted to because it's still independent of the other masks, but that saved me a lot of time from having to redo the mask entirely. Another thing you can do that is a really good time saver and also helpful for your workflow is to mask groups. If you have several layers and you want to use the same mask for all of them, then consider grouping them and creating one unified mask. This will save you a lot of time, it makes it easier to edit the mask, and it also helps keep the layers panel organized. Let's take a look at this example inside of Photoshop. Here I have a photo and I've added 3 adjustment layers to it. I'll toggle the before and after so you can see what it's doing to the image. But the problem is, I only want all of these adjustments to apply to the barn, and I don't want it to affect the sky or even some of the foreground. I could create a mask and then duplicate it to all of them, but it's a lot easier to just create a group and then add a mask to the group. That way, if I ever wanted to make changes to a mask, I would only need to do it to one mask and not several. Let's go ahead and walk through the steps so you can see how this works. First, I'm going to group the layers. I have that top layer selected. I'm going to press and hold the Shift key and select the bottom adjustment layer. Then inside of the Layers panel, I'm going to click that group icon to group all of those adjustments. Next, I want to select the barn. I'm going to activate the background layer and then go up to Select Subject. Then I click on the group and I'll add a layer mask. Now I have one layer mask that's affecting everything inside of it. If I toggle this off and on and you look at the barn in the photo, you'll see that the only thing that's being affected in the image is the area that's masked. I could even add more adjustments inside of this group if I wanted to. So for example, if I wanted to convert only the barn to black and white, I could add a black and white adjustment. Of course, I'm not going to do that, but I wanted to show you that you can continue adding things inside of that group to further edit that specific area of your image. Now let's talk about linked masks. When you have a mask on a layer, by default, it's linked to the layer. That means if you move or transform the layer, the mask moves and transforms with it. However, you might need to move either the mask or the layer independent of the other. And unlinking the mask allows you to do that. Unlinking the mask is really simple. If you notice in the image to the left, there's a little link icon between the layer thumbnail and the mask icon. Clicking it will remove it. So now you no longer have that link and you can move each of them independent of the other. Let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop so you can actually see how this works. Here I have 2 layers in this document. I have a layer on the bottom with my niece Ashlyn, and then the top layer is a texture layer. It also has a layer mask applied to kind of remove some of that texture effect over her body. I'm going to switch to the Move tool by pressing V, and I'm going to move this around and you can see how they're linked together. So if I drag it around, you'll notice that the mask is moving with it. Right now, over in that Layers panel, I have the layer thumbnail active. Let's see what happens if I click the mask icon. By moving the mask icon, it's also moving the texture layer as well because they're linked. I'm going to undo that to get it back to the way it was, and now let's unlink the mask to see how that works. To unlink, simply go to that link icon and click it until it disappears. Now the mask and the layer are no longer linked together. I have the mask selected, so let's see what happens when I move the mask. The mask is moving independently of the layer. So if I ever needed to, I could relocate the mask without moving the layer as well. I'm going to undo that, And the more likely use for this is to actually change the way your layer is positioned. I'm going to click on that layer thumbnail, so now I can actually affect what the texture looks like. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Command or Control T to transform the image. I can move it around, or I can even resize it. So maybe I want to make it smaller so it fits the image again. If you want to bring it back to being linked, just click that link icon in the middle, and now everything is back to the way it was. Clipping masks allow you to apply an effect, a layer, or a group so that it's only affecting the layer that it is directly above. You can clip multiple effects above the same layer. If you look at the image on the left, there's a little downward arrow, and that indicates that the layer is clipped to that layer below it. Some practical examples of using clipping masks include creating collages containing an effect to only a specific layer, adding an image to a shape or an effect, and so on. And I'm going to show you some of these here in some examples inside of Photoshop. Let's look at this example real quickly, though, before we do jump into Photoshop. Here I have a document with the same image on 3 different layers. Above each of those layers is a color with that color blend mode to give it a colorized effect. What I'd like to do is have the color apply only to the layer that it's above. So what you do is you clip it. So for this example, that green layer needs to be clipped to the far left image. And once it's clipped, it's only affecting that layer. The same with the blue layer. By clipping that blue layer to the layer below it, it's only adding that blue color to that layer. I'm going to show you this example and a few more inside of Photoshop, so let's head over there and you can see how it works. Here I have that same example open inside of Photoshop, so let's walk through how this works. Because of the way layers work, the top layers are going to affect all of the layers below them, especially when they are adjustment layers or things like color fill layers with a blend mode. I have 2 other colors here, but they're not visible because that green layer at the top is overpowering it. But just below it, I have an image, and I only want to have that green affect that image. So I'm going to clip this green layer to that far left image. There are a few ways you can create that clipping mask. The quickest way is with the keyboard shortcut. What you want to do is press and hold your Option or Alt key and then hover in between the layers that you want to clip. When the icon changes, click, and now you've clipped that layer. Now let's go down to the blue layer and clip this layer to the layer below it. So I have that blue layer selected. Another way to clip your layers is to right-click and select Create Clipping Mask. And that does the exact same thing. You can also access these options using the little menu drop down here in the Layers panel. Because I already have a clipping mask with this image, I will see a Release Clipping Mask option instead of a Create Clipping Mask option. So if I click that, it basically removes that clipping mask. So you can go back and forth with them. So I'm going to clip this layer once again. I'm going to press and hold the Option or Alt key and click. And again, you can just toggle it back and forth if you want to. But that keyboard shortcut is going to be the fastest way for you to create a clipping mask. Let's jump over to another example. We'll start at the bottom of this so I can kind of show you the progression of what I'm doing with this photo. So at the very bottom layer, I have a color fill layer, and I just kind of pulled one of the colors from the baby's hat so it would look kind of neat. Then above it, I added a pattern fill, and this is like a water pattern, and I changed that blending mode to soft light, so now I kind of have an interesting texture effect over that color layer. Next, I added a rounded rectangle, and this is what I'd like to have my photo inside of. So what I need to do is activate that top layer and clip it to that rectangle below. So I'm going to press and hold the Option or Alt key, hover in between the layers, and click. And now that image is contained inside of that shape. You can create any shape or even text in Photoshop and clip your layers, your adjustments, your groups into that layer. Let's look at another example of when this might be useful inside of Photoshop. So here I have a document with 2 layers. I have a background layer, which is a kind of sepia-toned image of a woman with a telescope. Then I added kind of a jewel light effect overlay to it, and I changed the blending mode to screen so it would blend really well with the image. But there's some color, there's like a blue color in the overlay, and I don't want any color to be there. I just want it to be black and white or have no color to it. I'm going to go ahead and open up my adjustments here, and I'm going to add a black and white adjustment layer. Now, that definitely did the trick, but it's also affecting that sepia-toned image, and I don't want the color to be removed from that bottom layer. So I'm going to clip the black and white adjustment to the jewel overlay below it. So I'll press and hold the Option or Alt key, and then click in between those layers, and now the only thing that's being affected by that black and white adjustment are the jewel overlays. There are multiple and endless ways that you can use clipping masks inside of Photoshop, and I'm going to be showing you some more examples of these in the hands-on projects in the next chapter.